So a quick video from me on Kirk. Died about a week ago when I was in England. Now back in Finland. So I'm just going to tell you like what my thoughts are about all of this. The first thing is that prior to last week, I'd never even heard of the bloke. Now, admittedly, I don't watch mainstream news anymore, but even so, that's quite surprising given the amount of hoo-ha that's happened since this, let's call it an incident. So the mainstream media and the controlled opposition, let's call them the establishment's alternative media, they've been all over this. It's an energy harvesting exercise, I have no doubt about that, because it's something that they've pushed massively. And typically when that happens, they set out the parameters of acceptable debate, or what they want us to talk about. So one thing that jumps out immediately is, oh, was he really shot or was he not? So I'm not going to go into that. I think it's kind of should be, if you've watched videos subsequently of him flashing all sorts of funny hand signals and stuff like that, come on. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about whether it happened or it did as described, or whether it was staged or whatever, because I'm just not going there, because that's what they want us to do. The second thing, when I was in England and this happened, I kind of immediately, my own thought was, oh, this is just, yeah, it's problem, reaction, solution. And I think one of their aims was to get us to call for greater gun control, like the state to have more laws regarding who can and who can't own weapons. And obviously, what they want is a monopoly. Only the government and its agents are allowed to be armed. And for those of you who don't understand, America's founding fathers, they understood this, that if you give the government a monopoly over owning weapons, they will turn against the people. So anyway, what was quite interesting, and that was the other thing as well, is that ideally they wanted that pressure, people calling for the thing that they wanted, which was tighter gun laws. They wanted that coming from the so-called right, because it normally comes from the so-called left, doesn't it? But this what happened to Charlie Kirk, he was on the right, wasn't he? So obviously his supporters would be on the right, so it'd be people on the right calling for gun laws, which would be very useful for the big club. But anyway, what was quite interesting about that is that the right didn't respond in that manner. So I think that was quite surprising. It certainly surprised the big club, I think. The other coordinated narrative that I saw in Britain when I was there last week, very, very quickly after this incident, was on the mainstream, which is like BBC and stuff. Oh, he deserved it. He deserved it. Oh, you see, you can have freedom of speech, but what do they say? There are consequences to that. So it was almost like, yeah, he had it coming to him. He deserved it. He said some pretty terrible things. And, the incident, his apparent shooting, was, it was justified because he said hurty words and people got triggered. And, yeah, it was only a matter of time before he got shot. And I even saw something to that effect in the Financial Times, because I picked up a free copy of that at the airport on the way out, and I just could not believe it. So what are they trying to do there? I think possibly two things. First of all, they're trying to incite violence, from other kind of leftists, that this is okay. It's okay to go off and use violence against people who have points of view that you don't like. And they, the big club probably hopes that, idiots, so-called progressives, more of that later, will copy it, and there'll be more violence. I think they were definitely after that. Maybe the second thing that they were after was self-censorship, for people on the right. Oh, I better be careful what I say, because if I say something like, that might trigger a progressive, somebody on the left, then something they I don't know, they might slash my tires, or they might, I don't know, do something horrible to me or my family, so I better shut up. And I don't think that that's kind of far-fetched at all, because most people are cowards. So if they feel a tiny bit of intimidation, they'll just close their mouths, which is exactly what the big club wants. They want people to close their mouths. So this was kind of a shot across the bows. You better close your mouth, because we've got plenty of violent idiots on our side. Another dimension to this that shouldn't be ignored is their desire to divide and rule. And I think they realise that then it's not really working on racial or religious grounds. So they've resurrected, as is their habit, an old-fashioned divide and rule, which is left versus right. So maybe they hope they can start a cycle of political violence. Will they succeed or not? I think the kind of the self-styled progressives, I think they are inclined towards violence, and they have no, the people that shout fascists at people and stuff, they have no, they will use violence, and they will support the use of violence against people that they disagree with, 100%. So me, I like solutions. So I've got some ideas about what we can do. The most important one is we've got to stop using their language and their frames of debate. I think one of my first videos on my channel, you can check it yourself by looking at the videos and select kind of oldest first, was that I did a video all about why the left versus right divide is totally bogus. I suppose you'd call it a psyop, and I stand by that. And what I'll do now is just very, very quickly explain why. So what we've got at the moment is you can either choose between left-wing authoritarian government or right-wing authoritarian government. And maybe right-wing authoritarian government might be a bit more kind of, I don't know, ethno-nationalist. Left-wing authoritarian government might be a little bit more of the kind of international flavour, the multicultural flavour. But when it boils down to it, it's the same thing, in that the state tells you what you can and can't do with your life. The state controls more or less every single aspect of private life, and that's basically where we are now. Well, we're not too far away from that. Just think about it. So we live in a society where over half of your income is taken from you using violence or the threat of violence, and then somebody called a politician decides what they're going to spend your money on. Does that sound like freedom to you? And then they spend it on, like, killing people in stupid wars, or poisoning you via, the old Britney Spears arm spears, or propaganda masquerading as education, all of that stuff. So we must stop using these terms, left and right, because they're meaningless. The only divide that is worth talking about is freedom versus authoritarianism. And authoritarianism is linked to the state. Compelled exchange, the state deciding what they're going to do with your money, the state telling you what you can and can't do in your private life. You know, they might dress it all up in that, oh yeah, we need this for the greater social good, and you're not trustworthy, you're all selfish. So these people called politicians, who are way more moral than you, honestly, come on, that they're gonna moderate, you know, the excesses of the free market economy or whatever, blah blah blah, which we've not had since 1914, by the way. So what we must do is, you know, these people that call themselves left-wing progressive socialists, what we mustn't call them left-wing. What we must call them, or refer to them, is as authoritarians. In fact, at the last school that I worked at, I used to use this phrase a lot in front of these people. I used to call them PC authoritarians, politically correct authoritarians. And also, the other thing to do as well is, when you're referring to, you know, the 1930s technocratic government in Germany, you know, call it by its proper name. These people were National Socialists. These people were in favour of a technocracy. So, you know, this is why I'll have no truck with anybody on my channel who tries to tell me that, you know, life was wonderful in Germany in the 1930s under a technocracy. You know, the other thing as well, you know, that's kind of quite funny, it's just like complete ignorance of history, is these days the people that call themselves progressives, they're in favour of censorship. You know, they want people cancelled. They want certain books removed from the syllabus in, I don't know, in schools. They want books removed from libraries. They are no different, and they call other people Nazis, when in actual fact this is exactly what the Nazis did in Germany. They burnt books. You know, the Nazis weren't fans of free speech. You know, for those people, I don't know if there are still any on my channel, but for those people that kind of think that the Nazis were like, you know, in favour of free speech, they didn't like, you know, they opposed censorship, and they had a battle of ideas inside Germany in the 1930s, and people could have open, free debates, and you know, the police didn't go around arresting people who said things that the government didn't like. Yeah, these people, they need to kind of just wake up. And certainly I don't want to live in an ethno-nationalist police state. So this is why I don't, you know, this kind of thing of this revisionist history that really, you know, the German National Socialists were the good guys. They're only the good guys if you are fans of authoritarian government. So for me, the solution is, as I've mentioned thousands of times on this channel, is that we scale back the size and the power of government, and we start to run our own lives again. And all exchange in the future must take place on a voluntary basis, and we are allowed to have a battle of ideas. I forgot to mention this in the other video, but when I was in London, again, I was just on this roll where I was just talking to anybody. I just don't care anymore. But there was these two young guys, and I heard them talking about freedom and the use of theatre. So I just I listened to them for a while, and then when my wife came in, strength in numbers, I bowled over to these guys and shook their hand and said, it's like really refreshing to hear two young blokes talking some sense. And this is what we got to do. We've got to stop using their language of like, there is no difference really between the left and the right, because they stand for the same thing. They're both anti-freedom. They're both big government authoritarian ideologies. And yeah, we just got to stop, you know, just refer to, you know, you wouldn't refer to a horse as a sheep, right? So what we've got to do is, when they self-identify as kind of left-wing, just say to them, well, you're not left-wing at all. You're, you know, this left-right is bogus. What you are is authoritarian. You believe in big government. You believe that technocrats need to intervene in our lives and in the economy and between people engaging in private trade. And these technocrats define what social good is, and everything is based around collectivism, and you're fundamentally authoritarian. And you know what? I don't like you because I prefer freedom. So that's where the battle is. It's not left versus right. The battle is freedom, which is basically the free market and the individual, versus authoritarianism, which is basically the state and technocracy. So I think that's all I want to say today. So God bless.